I'm Veronica Dudo. Tonight on EWTN News Nightly, days after Pope Leo addresses immigration in the U.S., Vice President J.D. Vance responds. What he had to say. Growing rift, why Republican leaders in the Senate and the House are at odds with each other. New job numbers are out and better than expected, but are looks deceiving? We'll explain. Plus,
preparations are underway here in Lucas Oil Stadium, where we're broadcasting live from the National Catholic Youth Conference with a special guest, Pope Leo himself. That story coming up.
From EWTN, the Global Catholic Network, this is EWTN News Nightly.
Thank you for being with us on the Feast of St. Edmund the Martyr. Our top story tonight, Vice President J.D. Vance weighs in on the immigration debate. He says putting the interest of your citizens first is the very purpose of government. The Vice President spoke in the wake of recent comments from Catholic bishops and Pope Leo, who urged that immigrants be treated with dignity and as federal agents crack down on illegal immigration. White House correspondent Owen Jensen reports. Owen.
Veronica, speaking before an audience today, the Vice President reminded them that he is a devout Catholic, that he follows the comments that the Pope makes, and he laid out what he believes the Catholic Church teaches regarding immigration.
Speaking at Breitbart's Fireside Chat, Vice President J.D. Vance tells the moderator and audience,
but the Catholic Church's views on this are actually quite clear, and it's that, yes, you must treat immigrants humanely. On the other hand, every nation has the right to control its borders, and obviously how you strike that balance is very important, but there's a lot of room there to actually control your own borders for the sake of your own people.
Vice President Vance says border security is not just good for American citizens, but that it is the humanitarian thing to do for the entire world. And one of the things that has frustrated him about the immigration debate
is that we ignored how open borders were not actually good for the dignity even of the illegal migrants themselves. You had little kids getting sex trafficked. We had 300,000 missing children under the Biden administration that the Mexican drug cartels had brought into our country. You had cartels using, in some cases, 9 and 10-year-old children as drug mules for their activity.
Pope Leo recently said immigrants must be treated with dignity, even if they lack legal status.
I think we have to look for ways of treating people humanely, treating people with the dignity that they have. If people are in the United States illegally, there are ways to treat that. There are courts. There's a system of justice. I think there are a lot of problems in the system. No one has said that the United States should have open borders.
The Holy Father encourages Americans to heed the U.S. bishop's message on immigration. They wrote, "Human dignity and national security are not in conflict, and we oppose the indiscriminate mass deportation of people."
My charge is to look after the people of the United States of America, and you cannot do that if you're flooding the country with a ton of illegal immigrants and the drugs and the crime that they bring.
Also tonight, the ICE facility in Broadview, Illinois. Catholic faith leaders there are suing the feds, claiming they're being denied entry to distribute communion to the detainees there. At the White House, Owen Jensen, EWTN News Nightly.
The Vice President's comments come as the federal enforcement immigration crackdown ends in Charlotte, North Carolina. The operation, named Charlotte's Web, resulted in hundreds of arrests. It was led by U.S. Customs and Border Protection. The Mecklenburg County Sheriff's Office announced today that the operation is officially over. DHS says 250 illegal immigrants were arrested, including at least 44 with violent criminal records ranging from aggravated assault to known gang activity. On Capitol Hill, tensions between the Senate and House are as old as time, and it's not unusual for the Senate Majority Leader and the House Speaker to be at odds, even when they're in the same party. But what is unusual is making the rift public. That's what's taking place between Leader John Thune and House Speaker Mike Johnson over several high-profile pieces of legislation. Capitol Hill correspondent Eric Rosales joins us with more. Eric.
Hey, good evening, Veronica. Folks, here's a question for you. Should U.S. senators be able to sue the U.S. government, or in this case, the Department of Justice, for up to $500,000 of your tax dollars if phone records were seized without their knowledge? Well, that was the provision that the U.S. Senate tucked into the recently passed government funding bill, which the president signed into law. House Speaker Mike Johnson publicly said that he and his colleagues were blindsided by the provision added at the last minute.
I was very angry about it. I was. And a lot of my members called me and said, did you know about it? We had no idea. That was dropped in at the last minute. And I did not appreciate that, nor did most of the House members. Many of them are very angry about that.
The Senate drafted the proposal after 8 senators learned their phone records were seized by the Biden-era Justice Department as part of its so-called Arctic Frost investigation into alleged efforts by allies of President Trump to overturn the 2020 election. So last night, the House voted unanimously to repeal the provision. The bill now heads back to the Senate. However, it will likely sit and rot in the Senate graveyard and go nowhere.
When it comes to allowing a federal government agency, the Justice Department in this case, to collect information, private information on individual senators, we think that's a violation of separation of powers under the Constitution. Obviously, Jack Smith violated the law in the way he went about that. This is something that needed to be addressed.
So that means the provision that was signed into law with the funding bill stays.
Everything House Republicans do is for show. They can't even get a commitment from Senate Republicans to take up legislation to remove this multi-million-dollar taxpayer-funded slush fund to benefit corrupt Republicans.
Even some Republicans whose phone records were targeted think having taxpayers foot the bill sets a bad precedent.
I'm all for accountability. I mean, I had my phone tapped, so I'm all for accountability. Don't get me wrong, but I think taking taxpayer money is not the way to do it. The way to do it is tough oversight.
But some Republicans say the government must pay.
People who are going to issue subpoenas in the future against private citizens to get their phone records without a court order, without a warrant, have to think twice. And if the government doesn't pay, you're going to get more of this. So the only way you're going to prevent this in the future is for somebody to be held liable and the government pay.
Also this week, there was infighting over the release of the Epstein files. The House passed it unanimously, thinking that the Senate would make changes to protect victims' names from being released. But Leader Thune dismissed Speaker Johnson's push to amend the legislation and passed it without any new provisions. Both leaders do say that they have a solid bond and are on the same page, but that could be tested in the coming weeks when several contentious spending bills need to be passed in both chambers. At the Capitol, Eric Rosales, EWTN News Nightly.
The U.S. jobs report defied expectations for September, revealing that employers added 119,000 new jobs. That's more than double what economists had forecasted. Almost 90% of the jobs are in 2 sectors, healthcare and social assistance, as well as leisure and hospitality. On the other side, the unemployment rate ticked up to 4.4% in September, the highest since October 2021, and up from 4.3% in August. This data offers input for the Federal Reserve's upcoming December meeting. The November jobs report is scheduled to be released December 16th after the Fed's rate cut decision. Joining us now to discuss is Marcelo Giugale, former Director of Financial Advisory and Banking Services for the World Bank. Thank you for joining us.
My pleasure.
So what do these numbers suggest about the strength of the job market?
Well, whenever the data is so much better than the market expected, it should be cause for celebration. In this particular case, I would moderate the celebration. I would sober it up a little bit because the data is very old. In finance, 2 months old data is probably passé. In the meantime, the shutdown took place, and this data comes from September, before the shutdown, which surely have an impact on the economy. At the same time, there are other pieces of data on the table. You have the consumer sentiment just published for November, and it shows that 70% of American households are expecting unemployment to increase. The same we see in the data about small business optimism. The National Federation of Independent Businesses just came up with data that shows very clearly that businesses are holding back, particularly holding back on investment. And these are the small businesses, the ones that generate employment and move the local economies. Add to that while we had this celebration in the stock market out of the Magnificent Seven, that means the big tech companies, the more traditional corporations, Home Depot, Target, Amazon itself, they are announcing big job cuts. So in general, great to have this data, but to watch out. We are not out of the woods yet.
Now, the Federal Reserve is expected to meet in December. What do you think they might do regarding a potential rate cut?
You should feel for the Federal Reserve because they are going to be making a decision without official data. By the time they meet December 9 and 10, they will not have the data either for October or November, the unemployment data, the job creation data. And that's like shooting with only one eye. You're pointing, but you're not really sure what you're seeing. They do have some surveys. They do their own investigations during the month, but the justification of whatever decision they take will be difficult to make. Now, the market is betting 40% chances that there will be yet another interest rate cut, another 25 basis points from 3.75 to 3.5. I would think that most of the members of the board will want to keep the powder dry. Should the data in January show that the economy is slowing down much faster than what we think, then they have a space to reduce interest rates deeper.
Well, we'll certainly be watching. Marcelo Giugali, thank you so much.
My pleasure.
The Polish foreign minister says his country will spend $100 million on American weapons to be delivered to Ukraine. That's in response to the railway explosion, which the country blames on Moscow.
The intention was clearly to kill Polish citizens. It's completely unacceptable. And as part of our response, I've just decided to spend $100 million on American weapons to be delivered to Ukraine.
Ukraine's presidential office says it has formally received the peace plan that Washington and Moscow grew up together without Kyiv's involvement. According to the Associated Press, the plan calls for major concessions from Ukraine. Officials say Zelensky will talk to Trump in the coming days about diplomatic opportunities as well as what's needed for peace. Meanwhile, the Kremlin says there are no ongoing consultations with the U.S. on ending the conflict. A final farewell today for a figure both admired and fiercely debated. Washington National Cathedral hosted the funeral for former Vice President Dick Cheney. During the ceremony, a bipartisan show of respect and remembrance.
Though he was inspired to service by President Kennedy, Dick Cheney became a Republican. But he knew that bonds of party must always yield to the single bond we share as Americans. For him, a choice between defense of the Constitution and defense of your political party was no choice at all.
In the front row, former Presidents George W. Bush and Joe Biden seated with their wives, joined by former Vice Presidents Kamala Harris and Mike Pence, with Al Gore just behind them. But one figure notably not present and not invited, President Donald Trump, who has remained publicly silent since Cheney's death on November 3rd. Vice President J.D. Vance, also not invited, offered restrained words this morning, calling Cheney a guy who served his country and wishing his family well in their time of grief. President Donald Trump said on Tuesday the U.S. must have one federal standard for regulating artificial intelligence. He said the technology risked being over-regulated if each American state issues its own standard. The Trump administration has prioritized winning the AI race against China. America's tech leaders agree, saying the U.S. must move faster to stay ahead in the global push for artificial intelligence. They warned that a 50-state patchwork of rules is slowing innovation and squeezing startups. But the rise of AI has also brought a host of fears about uncontrolled technology, ethics, and job losses. Patrick Hedger, the Director of Policy for NetChoice, joins me now. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for having me.
So the White House is floating an executive order to override state AI laws. Why does this matter, and what policy environment is needed for the U.S. to win the AI arms race?
Yeah, so it's really important because we really can't afford to have a patchwork of 50 different, potentially conflicting regulatory regimes around AI, especially as we're in this global competition with China. Really, there's only two poles in the AI world, and that's the US and China. That's where these systems are being built. That's where the startups exist. And the startups are what we're really focused on here, because the big companies have the money and the resources to comply with complicated regulatory regimes, but small businesses potentially in their garage don't. And so we don't want to see regulations or a regulatory patchwork smother those potential really valuable startups that were so important at the dawn of the internet era itself.
Now, AI has the potential to add $22 trillion to the global economy, but data centers will be needed. How significant is the Stargate project in scaling America's data infrastructure?
Yeah, Stargate is one of many huge projects in terms of building the actual infrastructure necessary for AI, but also necessary for the growing digital economy broadly. Data centers do both data storage and data processing, and they do those in a way that is more efficient than every single business or school or hospital having their own small data center. So that is a really important component of a 21st century economy. Data centers and AI are going to be essentially as important to a future manufacturing economy as electricity itself.
Now, there are some recent fears on Wall Street of an AI tech bubble. Are these concerns founded, and what should we be looking for in the industry?
You know, I'm not a financial expert, but what I can tell you is that we just saw that NVIDIA beat earnings, beat their expectations. So it shows that there is really strong demand here. And we've seen a lot of signals from other major corporations like JP Morgan saying that they're incorporating a lot of AI into their systems, and that they say AI is here, it's real. And so I think it's also important to point out that a lot of the AI that is being built now, the investments that are being made with cash investments from the people building AI, not debt like we saw ahead of the dot-com bubble.
Patrick Hedger from NetChoice, thank you so much.
Thank you.
We have a lot more still to come on EWTN News Nightly, Faith in Fear.
The blood of the martyrs is the seed of the church. And so we take that really serious.
As violence grips his home, we sit down with a Nigerian priest, what he's seeing firsthand. And Pope Leo addresses his fellow Italian bishops in Assisi, what he says he prayed for at the tomb of St. Francis. The 14th recently appointed Monsignor Anthony Ekpo, a Nigerian priest, as the assessor of the Holy See's Secretariat of State. The Holy Father has also been to Nigeria 10 times and was supposed to go before being chosen as Pope. It's a country he knows well, including the plight its citizens continue to endure. EWTN News Vatican correspondent Valentina Di Donato has more on this issue.
The surge of violence in Nigeria has been a growing concern in the country and across the international community for many years, with armed groups attacking villages and homes, kidnapping young girls, and often committing murder in cold blood.
You are a priest from Nigeria, the northern part that is so affected by all of the violence that continues to happen to Christians, but also to non-Christians. Can you tell me about the situation there that you have seen as a local and as a priest?
Yeah, so there was this constant burning of houses, and burning of people alive. The moment there is just a trigger, somebody's dead, somebody's killed, and then there's this reprisal, and then there's this attack. So we lived studying in fear. We lived, every day praying in fear, eating in fear, doing everything in fear.
EWTN caught up with Pope Leo XIV this week as he was leaving Castel Gandolfo and asked him about the religious persecution happening in Nigeria right now.
I think in Nigeria, in certain areas, there is certainly a danger for Christians, but for all people, Christians and Muslims have been slaughtered. There's a question of terrorism. There's a question of that has to do a lot with economics, if you will, and control of the lands that they have. Unfortunately, many Christians have died. And I think it's very important to seek a way with the government, with all peoples, to promote authentic religious freedom.
But the violence is not just about religion.
It has its root in many ways, many things. You can call it religious, you can call it ethnic, you can call it herders, farmers crisis, you can call it economy, you can call it political. So Pope Leo is very, very right when he says that it is not just, religious. It has all this dimension.
The Religious Freedom Report from Aid to the Church in Need found a severe and escalating wave of violence, largely driven by extremist Islamist groups such as Boko Haram and the Islamic State West Africa province during the 2-year reporting period. It also highlighted that continued violence is also driven by social factors.
It's truly important, the attention of the international community and our commitment, but it's also very important to describe the situation in Nigeria and what is happening there with objectivity and accuracy, because this is also very important to intervene.
U.S. President Donald Trump recently said that the United States would stop all aid to Nigeria.
They're killing record numbers of Christians in Nigeria.
And possibly go into the country, guns a-blazing, if the African country did not stop the killing of Christians.
Going back to the early Christians, right? Persecution has always, emboldened faith, because you see somebody giving his all and dying for this faith, and then that becomes the beginning of, they said, the blood of the martyrs is the seed of the church. And so we take that really serious.
In Rome, Valentina Di Donato for EWTN News Nightly.
Up next on EWTN News Nightly, Channel of Peace. The Pope makes a visit to the hometown of the patron saint of Italy and makes this special prayer intention. Plus, we are just one day away from the Pope's historic digital encounter with America's youth. We have a sneak peek. Welcome back. Pope Leo makes a visit to Assisi, concluding the General Assembly of the Italian Bishops' Conference. He reminded the bishops to keep Christ at the center of all they do.
Loneliness consumes hope, while numerous uncertainties weigh like unknowns on our future. Yet the Word and the Spirit still urge us to be artisans of friendship, of fraternity, of authentic relationships in our communities.
He finished his tour by visiting the tomb of St. Francis of Assisi, saying he prayed for peace. The Vatican Dicastery for the Causes of Saints has declared the life of a seemingly ordinary mother worthy of further investigation for sainthood. Ruth Pakaluk was a convert to Catholicism after meeting her husband at Harvard in 1976. A mother of 7, she lived her life with extraordinary faith, tirelessly serving her parish and leading the pro-life movement in Massachusetts. She died from breast cancer in 1998. The U.S. bishops now must vote to advance her cause, allowing the formal inquiry to start. The National Catholic Youth Conference is kicking off in Indianapolis, and this year, thousands of teens will get to speak with a very special guest. Pope Leo is set to address the nation's youth in a historic digital encounter tomorrow, where select teens will get to ask the Pope questions. The 3-day event taking place in Indianapolis gathers youth from the ages of 14 to 18 years old from across the country for prayer and fellowship. EWTN News President Montse Alvarado joins us from Indianapolis right now and is one of the hosts of our NCYC coverage. Montse, thank you so much for coming on.
It's so great to be with you, Veronica. You can see this beautiful stadium, Lucas Oil Stadium, where we had the National Eucharistic Congress last year, is now bringing together these 16,000, young people who are going to ask these burning questions of the Holy Father. 5 young people have been selected, and I know we had Mia Smothers, one of them, on earlier last week. It's great to be here.
We did. What is the energy like? You're there on the ground. Tell us, what are some of the preparations that are being made for this encounter?
So teens and their delegations are just starting to arrive. They've been celebrating Mass on the hour in the exhibit hall. All of the exhibitors are there. And there's this really interesting tradition that you're going to see tomorrow, actually tonight when we start our coverage. They like to trade hats. So I would ask all of our audience members, everyone who's tuning into News Nightly, to come on at 7 p.m. and look to see what hats we'll be wearing, Father Aquinas, Pete Burak, and I.
What do you think today's youth will take away from this first ever digital encounter and also the conference itself?
You know, today's youth really feel away from the church. That's not something I'm making up. It's polling that talks about how young people want an authentic and genuine encounter with their religion, right? And not just their religion, but of course with Jesus Christ. And so the Holy Father himself, choosing to be present and to listen for almost an hour. We really don't know how long this encounter is going to run. It'll at least be 45 minutes. It's a real, true sign for the youth of America, but also those tuning in around the world, thanks to the magic of EWTN's multicasting properties, to be able to really feel seen, heard, loved, and valued by the church.
Now, this is a historic moment, really unprecedented. An American Pope having this digital encounter with the youth. How significant is this moment? And also, tell us more about how this will probably be one that these teens will remember for the rest of their lives.
You know, speaking to these young people, these 5 chosen young people who are going to be dialoguing with the Holy Father, for them, this is life-changing. This feels like Denver in 1993, for those that remember it, that moment that really set a spark in the church in the United States. And I think we're feeling that right now. It's not a coincidence that we're back in Lucas Oil Stadium, where 60,000 people and many are online prayed together and adored the Blessed Sacrament, our Lord in the Eucharist. So the fruits of that are already being felt, and we'll have to wait and see what happens over the next couple of years and how those fruits are born in the United States.
Monte Alvarado, host of our NCYC coverage, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Make sure to catch our live coverage of the National Catholic Youth Conference starting tonight at 7 p.m. Eastern. And don't miss our exclusive coverage of the Pope's digital encounter with youth tomorrow starting at 8:50 a.m. Eastern. We thank you for watching tonight. Remember, you can follow us on social media, Facebook, YouTube, X, and Instagram at EWTN News Nightly. I'm Veronica Dudo. Good night and God bless.